Hi there. I just wanted to make a short video about Eddie Mair's recent transition from BBC, ace BBC presenter, to LBC. It was at a time of a lot of furore with the women's pay and everything to do with that, but a lot of people put it down to that, but I do deeply think he was wanting a change. I met him about a year ago, and then he sort of came across to me as a very complex character. He did an interview, then I just asked if I could have a picture taken, which is really lovely about. And then at the end of that, he just turned around, opened the door and just walked away. And it was like he'd turned Eddie Mair off. Now, whether that was what he usually does, or he at that time was just fed up with the same thing at the BBC. Perhaps it was a midlife crisis, who knows. But I thought it was strange. I thought it was an interesting character. Then I heard later that into this year that he was changing over to LBC, and I was quite surprised, but not totally surprised, because I could sense some sort of feeling of him being not jaded, but just the setup of the BBC being him having outgrown it, which is a great shame, because I could have seen him going on to be, I wished he'd have gone on to be a lot higher at the BBC, making decisions, because I think he perhaps could have got even into a position where he could have made it his own. Then, before the transition to the BBC, I read up a little on him, and I noticed he really admired a presenter on LBC called Steve Allen. And I tuned into Mr. Allen one morning last December, and I was shook. I was expecting to find a level of excellence. What I got was somebody who is presenting a show for 3 hours and has a difficult time to present it at 4 o'clock in the morning. But they are extremely unnecessarily derogatory about a lot of people. He does take a lot of the content of the show from newspapers that have obviously been, sent into the station at that time of day when you've got really fresh news. But he does tend to go on about reality stars, the Spice Girls, etc. And he's not very pleasant about a lot of people. And it's an earthy show. It's an earthy show. He's been doing it apparently for decades. So a lot of people up at that time liked to listen to him. I believe I made a comment on Twitter about something about the show being not my cup of tea, and I immediately got called mentally ill. I remember that. And I was just shocked that Mr. Mair liked that. But anyway, I've continued to listen because there's nothing else on at 4 o'clock in the morning. So, and a lot of other people listen. Jamie Oliver, Phil Vickery of This Morning. So it has some sort of relevancy to them and humour for them. I'm sorry, I do listen to be shocked. So perhaps he caters for all tastes. Anyway, he interviewed Eddie Mair to start off his stint at LBC. and that they devoted an hour to. And surprisingly, the one thing I do remember is Eddie Mair said that he'd got a famous thing he put to Boris Johnson from listening to Steve Allen. Because Steve Allen often says people are a nasty piece of work. I've never heard him say that, mind you. It's usually more derogatory than that. But anyway, he said he was an inspiration to him. The only other thing I learned about Eddie Mair personally is that he has sisters. Not how many, but he has sisters, which is a rare nugget. Because for all those years, Eddie Mair doesn't usually give any sort of vibe about his personal life. Not that I'm saying anybody should, but he is very guarded in keeping everything to do with him very private. Amazing how he's managed to do it, actually, because he never has, I believe in some journals there's something about his mother being a nurse, but past that, he will never mention his family or anything personal to him. So consequently, Steve Allen was a bit of a prize for him, because Steve likes to talk about himself, and it turned out to be, quite a reflexive interview for Steve. Anyway, Eddie started at LBC. I phoned in for the first show. It was very good, because I was in it. No, it was very good. I enjoyed it, I could see. And a lot of people were rooting for him, thinking, oh yeah, I hope he gets on well. I think it's a bit difficult with a 2-hour show, because quite frankly, 1 hour is fine for some people on LBC, because that lets them cater for purely callers to the show. If you have a 3-hour show, they have usually callers and anybody who is an authority on the subject they're presenting, or politicians that they can call in. 2 hours limits you a lot and crashes all that together. Recently, he's done a few interviews with politicians, but I mean, for example, recently he did Nick Clegg, who was answering calls for half an hour. And does anybody want to speak to Nick Clegg? I don't think so, because he isn't relevant. I believe LBC have a lot of technology. They're a very modern corporation. They really do have everything, all bells and whistles. The trouble being that do they back that up with journalistic power? I don't think so. It's like a complete contrast from the BBC. The only slice of humour we did get recently was, I think it was last Monday, when he'd had a lot of elderly callers ring in, but Eddie was very, very intent on finding somebody who was having sex during the show. And amongst all that political debate as well, I take my hat off to him. And he did play out with Barry White. Now, for me, that is shades of the humour that we got on Radio 4. And I think as long as he stays relaxed and we get more of that humour into the show and if it's less concentrating on jamming political things in that you think should be there, perhaps they shouldn't be there as much. Anyway, I wish him well with the rest of his stint at LBC, and I hope it all goes well, because quite frankly it's very interesting to see how it pans out. Anyway, this is my first video, so I'm not asking you to subscribe or hit the like button. I'll probably get a lot of dislikes anyway, won't I? But nice speaking to you. and I might make another one soon. So goodbye for now.